Siraj. Lola, I share her video and everything. Dia kata, but the video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You are tuning in at IMTV live with political insights, 40 minutes of political knowledge. My name is Eirfan Hakimi bin Shukri, and I'll be your new host for Political Insights Season 7. Right, before we go further, to dive into our topics, don't forget to follow IMTV on all of our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Alright, so before we start with our topic, I would like to give a simple quote that I've heard from my friends before. If you want something to be said, ask a man. And if you want something to be done, ask a woman. So this is a famous quote by Margaret Thatcher, and this quote entails to give us a little bit briefing about women empowerment. And I think most of you guys are wondering, why if the host today is not woman? So I think it's mostly because, to support such a good cause, you don't have to be a woman. I mean, men and women can support women empowerment, right? Yeah, okay. So that's the thing. Yeah, so before we go to dive into the questions, I would like to first introduce our distinguished guest for today. So first we have Dr. Rabi'ah, Dr. Rabi'ah binti Aminudin, our former HOD at Department of Political Science in IUM. She also received a PhD in politics in University of Manchester, United Kingdom. And she is specialized in gendered perspective on issues, policies, political institution and juga policies processes. Alright, and for the second speaker, we have Cikgu Siti Rahayu, which is an activist and also co-founder and principal of Buku, Jalan, Chow. How are you guys feeling today?
We're feeling good, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Both of you guys are feeling great today?
Yeah.
Yeah. Alright. So, I think we can proceed with the first question. So, I would like to direct this question to Dr. Rabi'ah first. Alright, so the first question, as someone who is very familiar in this field and also have done many researches on a gendered perspective, what is your observation or your views on women's participation in politics in general?
Well, thank you very much for the question. I think what we can see is that women's political participation in general at the global level is still very low, right? The UN had set at least 30% of women decision makers, but until 2021, only 25% of women have become members of their legislative assemblies globally, right? And if we look at Malaysia, for example, our female MPs at the federal level also is still low than expected. In fact, we had lower number of female MPs in the recent election, right? So what we see is that this trend, right, is repeated at the global level, right? And our country is one of the case study that highlights the low number of women in terms of their position as decision makers.
Okay, all right. So from what I can understand, Dr. Rabi'ah said that the percentage is still not achieved, like the 30% is still not achieved,
Yes.
and Malaysia is one of the case study that we can see in this context. All right. Okay, so second question will be directed to Cikgu Siti Rahayu. All right, in this modern era, what are the platforms available for women to participate actively in politics? Do you think there are enough opportunities for women in politics? And is it created or is it already there, the opportunities?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. One thing that you forgot to introduce about me is that I am actually the alumni of political science.
Yeah.
I,
I'm so sorry for that.
I graduated from this university and I love this university so much. Now, when we talk about women in politics, right, it is not something that is like, alien. Because, right, if we really look back at the history of Malaysia, how Malaysia was come into existence. What else? Our first elections. Women's are always the one that the machinery that oils the election. Only that, right? It is always said that history are written by the winners, and I think um the culture and the traditions of this country, right, highlighted women, men as leaders. That is why, right, women were said as not being that participative in political process. While it is not, um, I think growing up, I witnessed myself women being the major machinery of all political parties. They are. During election days, right? I think you guys can see that women's are outside and then asking for people to vote and everything. They are the one who are really involved in the process of elections and everything. But that's about that. Women's in Malaysia, not only in Malaysia, I think in Southeast Asia, we are still under that idea that man is a more suitable leaders. That is why, right, not a lot of women surface, you know, to the political scenes, because the scene is still the upper level, right, is still controlled by the boys. It's still the boys' club, the gentlemen's clubs, where it's very hard for women to penetrate to, because the activities, I think, and the way that we are brought up, right? There's not there's how to say, there's some separations of activity, separation of culture, separations of everything in terms of women's and men, and that's also translated in political scenes where man is viewed as the normal's leader, right? And women's are only the backbenchers. So that's happened, and I think we're not that progressing, because if we read a lot of stories of women's leaders in the past, right, the numbers actually are just the same like what we're having today. It's still 18%, 20%, something like that. It never comes to 30%. We are in a time where we thought that women are more highlighted, women are more celebrated in politics. But I think it's about time that we really have this kind of discourse to bring out more women in politics and tell women that, hey, politics is your field. Politics is a women playing field. This is the time. Yeah.
All right. So I think I would like to conclude and ask a further clarification. So based on what you've answered, I can concluded that you are trying to say that women, they're doing the groundworks and direct works, and men, they always take up the leadership position, right? So does it mean that women, they they do the work, but since they work it indirectly, so they are not comfortable of being in the leadership position, or is it just because they are not able to penetrate?
I don't think women are not able, right? But somehow it is being, uh, I don't want to say this word, but I think it's just some kind of indirect indoctrinations that, oh, this is not women's role.
Mm.
You know, women's role is like this.
It's been social conditioned.
I think it's being conditionally conditions by the culture, by the society and how it works. The roles has been, I don't know, cocooned to some sorts of, or this sphere that, oh, this is women's role, this is man's role, while basically both can actually play the same role.
All right, I think we get a clear answer for that question. All right, so back to Dr. Rabi'ah. All right, so what are among the main challenges or barriers faced by women that restricts them from being involved in politics and also activism? So, for example, like glass ceilings. Can you please further elaborate?
Okay, I think going back to Cikgu Rahayu's points, when we talk about challenges that women face, there are, for example, iron triangle, sort of. right? Where you have the social-cultural factors, you have the political institutional factors, and then you have, the economic factors as well. So when we look at all these challenges, the first one is the socio-cultural factors in which Rahayu highlighted, where women have been conditioned to be the followers. And this actually is highlighted in many research that women are active in politics. They participate in politics, but the level of participation of women in politics is limited to the grassroots level, right? Where women would be the one who would, run the machineries. They would go out and ask people to vote. They would prepare the food. They would, prepare all the facilities needed. And what we see is that the man would be upfront. The men would be the speakers in political speeches, for example, right? The media would highlight the men as the political figures. And we often forgot to highlight the contribution of the women. So their contribution become invisible, and people would think that women are not present in political process. And this is why also I think when we measure political participation only based on the leadership role, right? We forgot to see and value the contribution made by women. In fact, numbers of women in some political parties are actually higher than men, but these political parties then, the leadership position would be full of men as well. So that is one thing. Secondly, also is the political institutions, right? The electoral system, for example, is not friendly to women. We still have first past the post, and when we have first past the post, definitely it's very difficult for women who have many disadvantages to go forward. Yeah, so I think all of these factors come in and become obstacles for women to participate actively.
Okay. Alright, thank you, Dr. Bia, for answering the questions. Alright, so before we proceed with the next session, we are going to take a little bit of break. So grab a coffee, grab your popcorn, and also don't forget to stay tuned. We'll be back. Assalamualaikum. We're back with the second session for today's episode. Alright, so previously we've been talking about the introduction to women and politics, and now I guess we'll just proceed with the second part of it, which is the perception towards women in politics. So I would like to direct these questions to Dr. Rabi'ah again. So from your research and experience, do generally Malaysian citizens have more faith in men as leader compared to women? And if this is the case, why does this happen, and how can we change this dynamic?
Right, I think Cikgu Rahayu will talk more about this also later. But I think one of the thing is that we see that there is also a gap, right? A gap in terms of public perception of women as leaders, and how they perceive also men's role as leaders in the society. What I see is that from my research, it shows that the younger generation are much more open towards having women as leaders. Why? Because they have less prejudice towards women's ability. But if we go to certain demographics, for example, where they are more used to the idea of having men as leaders, there is still very strong perception that men are the better gender to be leaders. And this is also related to their role in religious practices, for example, right? From my conversation with women politicians, sometimes they mention about the ability of men to lead prayers, the ability of men to be in the masjid compound, for example, right? Where they say women have menstruation, therefore there are times women cannot be in the masjid. So that to them already become an obstacle to accept fully women as leaders. However, what I also observe is that women leaders tend to be more accepted once they have proven themselves. And therefore, we see that female MPs often have to work twice harder than male MPs, right? Because they have to prove to their constituency that they are worth of becoming their leaders, right? In which this is something that the men MPs might not face, right? Or it might not be as prevalent to the male MPs. And also what I observe is that they are now more acceptance, higher level of acceptance towards women as leaders. But if you're talking about the highest position of leadership, right, in which women as prime minister, for example, that might be something can be quite controversial in our society. I think there are still reluctance. Even if we look at the US example, right, there are still many Americans who cannot accept Hillary Clinton as the president. Mainly because of there are biases towards her gender, right? So I think we being, in Malaysia with a much more conservative setting, there are still biases for women to be considered as political leaders. But there are more acceptance towards women as MPs, for example, to be political leaders at local level. But at the highest level, there are still reservations, I would say. Yeah.
Right, I guess I can quite agree to what Dr. Rabi'ah has said. Yeah, it's really, from my perspective also, I think that is the case. All right, so the second question is for Cikgu Siti Rahayu. Right, so when we talk about women, more women involving in politics, it is often the stereotype of the society to say that women are being unstable and emotional. So would that, hence they would not be a good decision maker. So what do you have to say in regards to this?
I have a very bad attitudes towards that kind of questions when people throw that to women's, right? Because I will seriously dismiss that, because I will say that it's 2022, things that women's are emotionals and not a good leader, and women's are guided by the emotion is so not right, so not true. It's not, because I think, right, that's again a gender stereotyping, and actually, right, it has a very bad sides to men as well, because, right, then we are actually saying that men's leaders shouldn't be vulnerable, they couldn't be sad, they couldn't be emotional, well, it's human being. So I believe, right, emotion is needed in today's political setting, because, right, I think what we need is a compassionate leadership. If not, right, you will be disenchanted by the reality of the society. So I believe having an emotional, you know uh, emotion has a good side to it.
Yes.
compassionate, empathetic leader will be very good in the setting of a country like Malaysia. Like right now, we are facing flood. There's um, climate change effect on a lot of things that's happening in the country, right? So imagine if we have a leader who's not
It's not being emotional.
compassionate,
Yes.
who didn't have emotion, what will happen, right? So yeah, mm, 2022 going to 2023, women should not be said that they cannot be a leader just because they're emotional. I think a lot of women's leaders has proven that. And I also want to comment on the things that when it is women leader, then our question is basically um um the same questions to women's. It is like, why do men's leaders didn't get that kind of question? Stuff like that. People did not really view women as leaders first. Women would be viewed as women first, leaders second. While actually, right, the same questions that men get, we can answer that as well, or without having to reduce us to just a gender. You know, um, uh, I'm very active in politics. Um, Among the questions that I think my friends in politics often get is, for example, oh, you're doing politics and you're working and you're also a mother. How did you manage it? How did you look after your children? I mean, hello, there's a lot of men's political leader who are also a husband, a father, right? Why is it they never get to ask that kind of question? Like, yeah, how did you prepare all the food and then come here and everything? I was like, dia ada bapa kot. you know, stuff stuff like that, right? Man didn't get that question. So I think rather than we reduce leaders, right, to the gender, let us look leaders at their capabilities and ability. And I think this is about time that we stop talking about gender, but at the same time, right? I do understand the needs of addressing gender in politics because of this
Disparity.
disparity, but somehow it needs to be the approach need to be different as well. How we invite more women to politics, how we provide platform for women into politics. Yes, we need to look into what are the needs of both gender, but just by saying she's a woman, so we shouldn't have a lot of them, it's wrong. And um I am a person who sometimes think, why is it we need to put like 30% of women, 50% of women? We should have, if that women is good, we should have 100% of women. And if men are good, right, we should appoint that man to the position. For example, right, let's say we have 5 people in a team, and then all that 5 are good. But just because we need one woman, so we're going to put one woman as token, that's wrong. We need to look at people based on their capability and their capacity of doing work rather than their gender. And but you shouldn't be biased just because it's a boys club, a men's club, then you prefer your gender. That is wrong. Pening kan, miss you guys, Chow. What? But I think it's all about that. We have a lot of women who can compete with men at the same level actually in today's world. We should look into that. Yeah.
Right, I guess it's a very comprehensive and inclusive explanation from Cikgu Rahayu. So I think women being emotional, it shouldn't be a negative side. It shouldn't be the downside of being a woman. I think it is very a strong point because without being emotional, you couldn't be compassionate. If a mother is not emotional, how can she love the child? Yeah. So and I think that being emotional is also a good criteria for a leader because you wouldn't be able to empathize with the citizens if you're not being emotional. And I also like the point of Cikgu Rahayu, in which she actually said that all of this, meritocracy, Because if you are good, then you should go up, and then shouldn't be, any quotas. Because if you're capable, then you are capable. Then you should go for the prize. You should go for the position. You should go for the, leadership position, and also, all of this political participation, right? Okay, so thank you so much, Cikgu Rahayu and Dr. Rabi'ah. So I think we'll take another break for the session. Yeah, and we'll back with the third session after the break. Okay, sit tight and we'll be back.
Oh.
All right, hi, and we're back with our third session. So I guess without any further ado, I would like to address the first question to Dr. Rabi'ah. All right. So seeing that our close neighbor Singapore has already had their first female president, do you think it's possible for Malaysia to have female prime minister, and how do you think the response would be from the citizens?
I think this is a continuation of
Yes.
what I elaborated earlier, right? And I think one of the things that is that uh, Singapore, they elect their president. So it is a popular vote, based on popular vote. While in Malaysia, we have a parliamentary system in which, of course, Singapore also has parliamentary system, but in terms of their president, they have a popular vote, right? But in Malaysia, how do we choose our prime minister? It is chosen by the political party that won the election. So I would say that in order for us to have female prime minister, apart from the public support, we need to have first women to occupy top positions in political parties. What we see now is that there is less than 30% of women actually occupy top positions in political parties, and there is no political parties that actually make a promise that they want to have more women in their political leadership positions. So I think in order for us to do that, it might take another 2 or 3 cycles of election where we would see more and more credible women occupying the top political party positions that could enable them to have the mandate from their MPs to actually become the prime minister. And if I may just go back to the point, the earlier point of how women is emotional and unstable, because that always got me riled up every
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Uh, so I always ask when that particular question I ask in the class, for example, and some people would say women are emotional, they cannot be leaders, right? They have unstable emotions because of their hormones and whatsoever. And I told them, have you looked at the parliamentary session? Who were the one who was shouting? Who were the one who called people monkey, beruk, ke apa, ke kera, ke whatsoever? It's not the women, right? So in a way that we often put down women just because of their emotions when we should actually be able to celebrate also those emotions, as what Cikgu Rahayu said. And I think unless we are able to break down these stereotypes, gender stereotypes, and we start to celebrate a more compassionate, kind leadership that is also a combination of masculine and feminine traits of a leader, then only we could have a prime minister, female prime minister, in which, as I said, it might take another 2, 3 cycle of elections, and until we see that there are more women that should occupy the top leadership positions in their political parties. And I hope political parties will take heed of this and start to just, they shouldn't just make having more women as part of their manifesto. They should start implementing it themselves. And I think the very best place for them to start off is by having promises, right, and policies that actually push women to top political party positions. That is my answer.
All right. So what can I say about your answer is that women needs to have more position in the dominant coalition, and also it is possible for us to, accept that. But it will take a lot time in the future. All right. Okay. So the next question for Cikgu Siti Rahayu. So as general election has passed, and we have seen that throughout the process, be it contesting, winning the election, and even the position in the cabinet. So we do not see the 30% of the women representation as it should be. So how do you think with this lack of participation would ensure that their voices can be heard?
Um, I also want to answer on women's prime minister, right?
Yeah.
Have we ever in Malaysian's political history see any female president of any political party? I don't think we have.
Wan
You know,
Aziza.
Wan Aziza, yeah. But we know of this that circumstances, right? Yeah. So so that's about that. Until all the political party in Malaysia, you know, understands that even women can be the leader in their respective political party, then we can talk about having women as prime minister in Malaysia. Now, on the election, right? I have to comment on this one scenario that happened during the election, where when we place women's right as a candidate, we tend to place another women's as the opponent for that women's. I think in Sepang we have 3 female candidates. In Ampang we have I think around
5.
5 women's candidates competing against one another. So see, if let's say right, so yeah, I know all the party put their women candidate right, but we already know out of that 3 women's, one will be the winner, 2 will just fade away in that process. Yeah. So I think that we need to look into that women not only compete with another women's. So there's a room to be changed there. Because when you put women to compete against women, then you would not have higher numbers of the winning candidate. So there's lesser option for women minister, right? Um, yeah. And I think, right, I think only PBM or the party who fielded the most women candidates. The rest, I think, not even 30% of women are fielded. Even BH, how many percent that BH fielded women?
I think in average women candidates is there are higher number of female candidates, but the number of female candidates by each political party still does not exceed 25%. So 20% is the highest.
Yeah. So how are we going to, you know, to dwell in that questions when we did not feel enough women, huh? And then I think being a political party, another things that we experience as women's is that women's ourselves. So this one, right? I'm speaking to my fellow women's leaders. Never thinks that we are incapable of delivering just because we are women, and never reduce um our responsibility to all those that we think is our responsibility that other people cannot take up. It's about time for us women also to see that um women as well need to learn not to stereotype ourselves into certain roles only, and believing that, oh, there's a better leader. If you think you have the capability and the capacity,
You should go for it.
You should go for it. And I believe, right, for example, I don't know during your time, but during my time in Kulliyah of Political Science, right, I think the majority is women in political science department. We only have a few males. So we can see that there's interest of women in politics, but where are they after that? Why is it they don't take up the political leadership roles? So I think that's among the questions that in your assignment you can work on that. Seriously, do research among your colleague, right? Your classmate. What is their take on them women's being in the political leadership role, or just a more direct question: would you want to run in elections? And if you don't want, why? So might be through that, right? University themselves can 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 learn more, do write more, and then present it to all political parties. This is the reason why and why and why. And for that, right, might be we can solve the questions of lacking of women's in politics. Not that women's didn't want, but I think um a, a bigger option need to be shown their way. More women's leaders that they can have as their role models. Yeah, things like that.
Like in the recent IRKHSS election, I saw that there are a number of female candidates. Good, Alhamdulillah. But I don't see any from political science. So,
Oh, really?
so I'm hoping that in the next cycle of election that we will have female candidates from political science as well.
Yeah.
And looking forward to that as well to address. So hopefully these women would then later become Malaysians political leaders.
Yes.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. I mean,
All right, thank you both of you for answering that questions. Unfortunately, we're about to end our episode for today. Before that, we would like to thank you, Cikgu Siti Rahayu, and also Dr. Rabi'ah for your time and also cooperation, and also the input that you've given us today is very inclusive and a very interesting topic to be discussed about. All right. Okay, so before we go, don't forget to follow, like, and comment on IMTV social media platforms. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.